Yes, good evening and welcome to the Oneida County History Center, and welcome to those of you joining us virtually. My name is Rebecca McLean. I'm the Executive Director here at the History Center, and I would like to thank everybody for coming today to celebrate the launch of Deirdre Sinnott's new book, The Third Mrs. Galway. We know the hard work firsthand and dedication that went into this debut novel. We've seen Deirdre diving deep into her archives, and I'm sure at many other institutions as well. So we're really honored that she chose us for her launch and to be a part of this celebration. And although this is historical fiction, we do think it tells an important part of our local history. And we are very lucky to have historians like Deirdre who are very creative, who can help share our area's history. So with that, again, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoy the program. And at this time, I invite Mary Hayes Gordon to come up and say a few words.
Hello, everyone. I am Mary Hayes Gordon. I am co-chair of the United County Freedom Trail Commission. We are one of many such commissions throughout the state, and our directive is to research, document, and make available to the public information on Underground Railroad and abolition activity and history here in our county. And researching for the Freedom Trail is how I met Deirdre and became familiar with her work. And I am pleased to say she became a member of the Freedom Trail. So the Underground Railroad is often romanticized, but the reality is not romantic. The reality is that people were fighting for freedom and they were literally fleeing for their lives. It was dangerous and many did not make it to freedom. Finding and telling their stories is an important piece of our country's history and origin. This is what Deirdre is doing so well in her research and in this novel. Our approach to this history is changing, and we see that in Deirdre's work. Her perspective is inclusive. Who was actually involved? How did people get to this point? Her view is wide and her focus is on the whole situation, not only a few well-known names. Her novel is especially important in that it shines a light on the role women played in the Underground Railroad and abolition, as they are very often disregarded. When Deirdre researches, she does not only sit in her chair typing on the computer or stay in the library reading what others have done. She is an active researcher. When she wanted to know more about two freedom seekers who left Virginia, she traveled to Shenandoah County, Virginia. She went to the courthouse. She talked with people who knew the history of that place. In this way, she literally traveled the routes taken by freedom seekers. This is how history can move from a static set of dates and names to the lives of real people who were courageous and desperate, and who ended up being strong catalysts for moving our country forward. I am so pleased to be able to work with a researcher of such caliber. We are currently working with Dr. Judith Wellman on a National Park Service project, creating a massive database of information on the Underground Railroad and abolition activity here in Oneida County. Deirdre has been part of our increased activity and interest in this area of study regarding Underground Railroad history. She spearheaded our first Abolition History Day back in 2015, and her research has expanded the information that we use on our Freedom Trail walking tour. She is now bringing Utica to the forefront in this historical novel. This area was important to the abolition of slavery, and I am proud to work with a researcher and now friend who can tell this story through fact and fiction. Thank you, Deirdre. And now I am very pleased to introduce to you Reverend Sharon Bow, who is the pastor of Hope Chapel AME Zion Church, the oldest Black church here in the Mohawk Valley, and founded by the well-known self-emancipated slave, Jermaine Logan. Pastor Bow.
Good evening. I'm just so privileged to be here on today. Good evening. I'm just so privileged to be here on today. This book, and I know historical facts and history may sound like something that only a few people would be interested in, but it really speaks to people today. It really speaks to how we can live in contentious times, how people can be at each other's throats. I mean, you know, we just had the insurrection at the White House. So our politics can really get us at each other's throats. And that's because of the way we've been raised and how we've been educated, who we've been around. But this book shows us that in spite of all those things that impact our lives, that in the moment, when life gets real, when you meet human beings, you have to make that choice. You have to make the choice of whether you're going to treat each other like fellow citizens. Are you going to make the choice to show each other humanity? The characters in this book made those types of choices. And even though they came from diverse backgrounds and they had to face sexism, classism, they had to face racism, they had to face capitalism. And so they had to face all those isms. And in spite of that, they still made choices, some that might even cost them their lives. And so for today's generation, especially with children, we have to learn how to reach inside ourselves and be human beings and be able to see each other as human beings in a broader race, in a broader brotherhood. That's what the third Miss Galloway brings to the table. So I encourage and I was talking to Deirdre and I said, I hope the school system picks this book up. You know, the history teacher can be involved, the English teacher can be involved. You know, it could be a wonderful school project, especially now that Juneteenth is a natural holiday. It would be an excellent resource. So I pray that more and more people will share this book for the historical facts and for how we see each other in the 21st century. Thank you, Deirdre.
Welcome back. At this time, I'd like to introduce Kaylee Jones. Kaylee Jones is a writer and the publisher of Kaylee Jones Books. Her novel, A Soldier's Daughter Never Cries, was made into a film starring Chris Christopherson, and she wrote the well-regarded memoir, Lies My Mother Never Told Me, or excuse me, Lies My Mother Told Me. And the Kaylee book slogan is Dedicated Writers Taking a Stand. Kaylee Jones.
Yes, okay, awesome. It's a great honor to be here tonight. And I was so touched by Reverend Baugh's words. And I'm just, and Mary Hayes Gordon as well. I'm just so touched to be here and to have been a part of this project from early on. And I'm just delighted to be here with Deirdre. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation and she's going to read a bit from her book. And then we're going to have questions from the audience. I met Deirdre quite a few years ago at the Norman Mailer Center. I was teaching a memoir workshop and we became very close fast. And we shared a lot of the same ideas and ideals. And when she told me her idea for this novel, I was so thrilled and said, Deirdre, this is really an important book. We were both worried in some ways about approaching the subject. And it took many years. Deirdre must have spent 6-7 years researching and writing this book. And it was such an honor to that Johnny Temple of Akashic Books agreed to publish it. I'm under the aegis of Akashic Books, and they're renowned activists. They've been at the forefront of publishing underrepresented voices for 25 years. And it was just such a thrilling thing that Johnny agreed to publish this book under Kaylee Jones Books. So I would really like to introduce to you my friend and the writer Deirdre Sinnott, who wrote this fantastic novel, The Third Mrs. Galway. Deirdre?
Okay, folks, I'm not sure if you can see me. Just a little tiny me, but it's still me. Trust me. Kaylee, I should just read now, right? Let's do that. I'm going to give you a little warning, though, because some of the language in this piece, I'm full screen there. Okay, thank you. Some of the language in this piece is of the period. And so, brace yourselves for that. And also the thing you have to brace yourself for is I'm going to do some singing, and I'm really, shouldn't happen in public, but this is going to happen anyway. All right. Lightning flickered. Helen counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thunder. The clatter of rain on the roof slowed, as if God had simply moved his water jug to some other spot. The storm was moving off. She took a deep breath before plunging into the backyard. Light rain landed on her face as she marched to the shed. The iron handle was still in place, but still she swung the door wide open and stepped inside. A woman's voice cried out. A metal bowl crashed to the ground, and Helen heard scrambling as if a sleeping fox was moving. Out of the gloom, a skinny black boy leapt before her, a hay fork in his hands. Helen gasped and backed up to the frame of the door, her muscles twitching in fear. "Stop, Joe," came a sharp female voice from the floor. The boy neither dropped the long wooden hay fork nor backed away. "Sorry, miss," said the voice. "Keep away from me," cried Helen, stepping back. "Joe, I told you," the voice said sternly. "Get back here." The boy lowered the weapon, but did not withdraw. "Sit down," the voice commanded. He kept his eyes on Helen. As he kneeled, he revealed a woman sitting on the dirt floor, her legs straight out in front of her. She leaned against a sturdy built-in cabinet, a very large pregnant belly resting between her legs. "What are you doing here?" demanded Helen, thinking that she should run and get who? Her husband? No, he had a broken leg. The doctor? Oh, heavens, not him. Maggie. She would get the cook out here and, "We're sorry, miss. Just getting out of the rain," said the woman, talking very quickly. "Just getting out of the storm. Don't worry. Joe here got surprised is all." "You can't be here," said Helen, calming a little, stepping back into the shed. Looking at the woman more closely, she noticed that her tan blouse drooped with dampness. Her skin, the color of a newspaper left too long in the sun, was heavily freckled, and her face was round as a casserole dish. Her hair disappeared under a dirty gray cap. A shawl was pulled tight over her shoulders as if she were freezing. Suddenly, the woman clutched her stomach and groaned. "Mama," the boy cried. "Is the baby coming now?" said Helen, her voice strangled with new fear. The last time she'd been around a woman this close to laying in was during her mother's labor. Poor Mama had screamed and ranted when the baby tried to come out too early. She had pulled off her own breeches and groped at a tiny foot dangling between her thighs. The ordeal had finally all ended, but the time spent waiting for her father to get the doctor had been full of blood and panic, leaving Helen helpless, and her mother and her new brother quite dead. All the doctor had done was hold a mirror to her mother's mouth and declare that she was at peace. "I'm getting the doctor," said Helen, looking back at the house. "No, no," cried the woman. "Don't. The baby ain't coming. Don't bring nobody else out here. You can't have that baby here. I'm getting someone." "No, no, no," the woman pleaded in a loud, desperate voice, her hands skyward, fingers knotted together as if in prayer. The boy jumped to his feet again and grabbed Helen's arm. "Let me go," she yelled and jerked backwards. "No, please, don't be scared. He's just a boy," begged the woman. With her next breath, she began to sing the first few trembling words of a lullaby. "Dear Baba, aya, aya, who Mama is right here." Helen froze by the thin, reedy voice as it followed a simple chorus in a slow, rhythmic melody. "Now you go to dream, aya, dream the night away." Something inside Helen shifted. She stared back at the woman who drew her hands around her pregnant belly, hugging the unborn babe. The tune, so plain and soothing, pierced Helen to her very marrow. For a moment, she had a vision of her mother, alive and young, her face close. She too was singing. The woman's voice cracked as tears coursed down her face. Helen felt tears gathering in her own eyes. Baba in the hay, ah-ya, Baba sleep away. All was silent. Together, as if on cue, all three released a breathy sigh. Helen wiped at her eyes and closed the shed door. She pulled an overturned bucket to the center of the entranceway and sat quietly for a moment. Who are you? Amari, miss. My son, Joe. The room darkened and brightened as clouds streaked across the sky. Maggie was still thinking about who would cook for Mr. Augustine after she passed, when the bell jingled in a high corner of the kitchen on its bouncy spring of coiled tin. What's he got in his head now, she wondered. Couldn't be more liquor unless that dirty doctor drank it all up. She pulled the cornmeal balls out of the oil and threw a tea towel over them. At the dry sink, she poured a bit of water over her battered, covered hands. She wiped her fingers on her apron and massaged her sore lower back and decided that if Mr. Augustine was going to ask her to do one more task, more than the cooking and the cleaning and the clothes washing and the ironing and the sweeping and the meal planning and the bed making and the mending and the larder stocking and the water toting and the fire starting and the ash hauling and the chamber pot cleaning and the keeping his whole house from sinking into Baloo Creek, she would fight him. Since the day Mrs. Galway died, she'd done everything but feed him like a baby. He got a new wife now, he got to get himself new help too. At the library, she knocked and entered. Augustine sat on his chair, his curly hair laying flat and pasted to his forehead. The doctor gazed into the street, his back to the room. Mr. Augustine, Maggie said as she approached. She studied his face for a moment. It was pale and dotted with sweat. He looked tired, she thought. Must be from trying to keep up with a girl too young. Dr. McCook may need the horse, said Augustine. Can you see to it? Maggie narrowed her eyes at the thought of being at the doctor's command. She stared her gaze around to the gilt mirror at the side of the door and leaned toward it. What are you doing? Asked Augustine. I'm looking to see when I turned into a stable boy, Maggie replied, turning back to him. The doctor's head swung around sharply. Augustine remained placid. I don't never tell you your business, she added. Certainly not, he said, his mouth rising at the corners. Maggie focused on him. I got to run this house. I got to keep you fed. And now I got to slop out the horse. You better be ready to go on one meal a day and no cakes. Careful, said Augustine. McCook looked on with undisguised outrage. Mr. Augustine, continued Maggie more softly now, all you got to do is put up your little pinky and some smart boy gonna come running. We'll find one who's gonna take care of that horse for a few pieces of bread and a bit of bacon. You'll see. Horace must have got to have a nephew somewhere dying to work. I'll ask him. I'm gonna take care of everything. She turned to leave. Is that all? Asked Augustine. I see some visitors arriving, said McCook. Or do you answer the door, or is that too much to ask? Maggie flicked her eyes at the doctor and strode out of the room. McCook put his hands behind his back. There's competition for mistress of this house. You be careful too, said Galway, the amusement dropping from his face. A door slammed, and Maggie re-entered the room. It's that slave-catching devil, Hickox, she murmured. You don't got to see him. I'll send him away. Hickox, said Augustine, glancing toward McCook. Unfortunately, I have to send him in. I'll go get my musket, and you ain't have to do nothing. Why don't he give up coming here? Maggie asked. Please send him in, Augustine said firmly. You don't owe him, and you keep him away from me, Maggie. Maggie turned on her heel and moved to the front door, opened it, and walked away. Two men stepped into the foyer. The tall, thin slave catcher entered the library first. Rainwater dripped off his wide-brimmed felt hat and onto the oriental rug. Under his black vest, his shirt was darkened halfway down his body. Mr. Hickox, said Augustine. Mr. Galway, replied Hickox, removing his hat. His companion entered, his boots leaving a damp trail. This gentleman is my new partner, Sam Swift. You and Mr. Colby have dissolved your arrangement? Asked Augustine tersely. I'm afraid Mr. Colby has departed this world, said Hickox. Suddenly, and in the execution of his duties, too soon. May his lot be better the next. The muscles on the side of Swift's jaw twitched. Mr. Swift here is a good Southern boy, got mixed up in pugilist circles. Hickox turned to Swift. You could punch him in the head all day long and he'd never fall. Betrayed by a weakness in the stomach. Sometimes a man has to accept abject failure before he finds his true calling. I doubt you came all this way to Utica and to our quiet corner of town in a punishing storm, no less, to talk about Mr. Swift, said Augustine, trying to shift in his chair. Pain crossed his face. Forgive me for being short. As you can see, I'm indisposed. State your business, sir. We have once again been charged with the highest duty, said Hickox, to find some valuable property. I hope you'll assist us in spreading the word among your considerable contacts. He leaned in and passed Augustine a handbill. $150 reward. Escaped from Barnwell Plantation, Virginia, July this year, 1835. A yellow wench, 30 years old, bright, named Susie. With her is a Negro boy of 10 years named Joey. She is 8 months with child. They may be receiving help. Susie is of light complexion, freckled, well-spoken, can read, and may be trying to work as a seamstress. Dangerous. The boy is of dark complexion, bushy red hair, skinny limbed. Originally ran with a mulatto man named Elimus, age 30, since recaptured. From best information, Susie and Joey are in the neighborhood of Frankfort, New Hartford, Utica, or Whitesboro. Any intelligence about the pair should be directed to Abel Hickox, care of the National Hotel at Utica on Genesee Street, north of the canal. Augustine blanched as he read. He looked up and saw Hickox studying him. He crumpled the handbill and tossed it to his side table. McCook picked it up and read it, whistled. Ooh, $150, that's substantial, isn't it? How much you get out of a deal like that? Smirking, Hickox kept his eye on Augustine. Doctor, the risk is all mine. I bought these two after we recovered the man and returned him to Arnold Barnwell. The capture was so costly that Mr. Barnwell no longer had the stomach for it. He turned his steady gaze to the doctor. If they slip away, as they have over the last 500 miles, then I get nothing, and I lose my whole investment. If I catch them, and I will catch them, I can sell each separately. That's 3 for the price of 2. 3, said McCook. The wench, the boy, and the babe. That's 3 by my mathematics. That's it. Thank you. So, oh. Okay. So the administrator has to do it. Sorry, we're getting, this is a hybrid event. So anyway, they're going to do it. They're getting their.
Can you hear me? But now I can't hear you, Deirdre. Now you're muted. Can you unmute, Deirdre? Are you
Yes.
there? Okay, awesome. So now we're both unmuted. There were a couple of questions. That was beautifully read, Deirdre. What a wonderful, 2 wonderful scenes that are, one of the storylines of the book that's very, very, like the main, very important tension in the book and conflict in the book. Very well done. We had a few questions that were asked by people ahead of time. So I will ask you those, and then other people can also ask more questions, and we can talk about the questions, and I also will ask you some questions as well. So here's the first one. What was the first book that made you cry?
It had to be The Outsiders, by, what's his name? Anybody? The Outsiders? S.E. Hinton. By what's her name? S.E. Hinton. I just, for some reason, I identified so much with Ponyboy. I read that book over and over and over again. And even though I was not from a giant city living in, urban life, I just really identified with that character. And so I was with that book every step of the way. And, I don't want to give up any of the secrets of the book, but there's somebody who dies, and I was, totally broken up about it.
Do you think that in part, feeling like an outsider, perhaps yourself, or never quite in sync with the world around you? I know we discussed this before, talking about memoir writing. Do you think that's influenced your perception of the world and of what it means to be part of a community?
I absolutely do. And I think that, I suffered some childhood sexual abuse when I was young. And it kind of made me feel like nothing was stable or steady, that everything could change instantly in a moment. And I didn't have the capacity, the emotional capacity or anything to be able to handle that kind of trauma. And then it played out in different ways, including, I'm sure, just alienation and never feeling normal or like the other kids, even though they might have been going through the same thing, right? I don't know.
What Reverend Ball was saying about one-on-one, if we understand, if we can see people as humans, and how important it is for all of us to have our perceptions challenged constantly, all the time. I thought that was such a wonderful thing to say. And I realized, my daughter and I were speaking, and she said, it takes 2 or 3 generations really for something to really change. And I was touched by that, because I feel like I'm sort of in the middle, as our generation, our age, all these new ideas, the 60s, we were little girls and we heard and we learned, but apparently, I thought we were better, which brings me to, a question I'm going to bring up later, which is the relevance of this book at this, as the Reverend said, at this very inflammatory time in our history. We're at a real turning point in our history. But we'll get back to that. Here's a second wonderful question. What would you tell your younger writing self?
I think that I would have tried to say, just keep going. Don't give it up, because whether it's good or whether it's bad, it's still human expression, and it's still expression from the heart for me. And that I ended up keeping a little bit of a journal, but it was only when I was upset. I never wrote down anything when I was happy. I mean, why bother, I guess, So I think I would have done better if I had a teacher. Now I'm gonna, Mrs. Suttermeyer, who saw that I wrote this one story, and she sent it to a writing contest, and it was accepted. It wasn't just immediately rejected. I think that's as far as it got, but it really gave me a really good feeling about it. And I mean, I all the time wanted to be creative. That's why I went into theater. That was one of my things. But it was hard to get away from my own emotional muck that followed me until I made a big change in my life and got sober. So I know this isn't a 12-step meeting, but anyway, I just, it just really changed my life and opened up the doors and made it more available for me to be able to follow this dream that I've had, that you have concretized into an amazing thing that's in the world now, outside of me. that, I'm so grateful for.
I was so moved earlier by the introductions, and I'm so pleased, that I was able to be a part of this journey with you. And I think really it's about, as you just said, the journey, the twists and turns. Everybody wants to write a book, but it's very hard to actually sit down and construct a book. I think that's one of the hardest things, is putting it together, as we know, and not giving up is sort of the main. There's so many roadblocks all along the way, and sometimes we have to wait a little bit and figure out how to get around the roadblocks and follow the lights along the road, and I feel that that we've done that, and you've done it in a truly remarkable way. Here's another question. This is the last one that I received ahead of time. I know you've done a lot of writing over the years. Did the idea of this book surprise you, or has it been percolating for a long time?
Oh, it's a shot out of the blue. It actually is. I started researching, I knew that Utica had been involved in the Underground Railroad, but didn't know how. And when I found out about the actual anti-abolition riot that happened in Utica in 1835, I dug right down in there, found out so much stuff, and I'm like, I've got to get this out. I was talking to a guy about making it into a musical, as if that's really going to get it very, very far out. And an opera, that's really even going to get it much further out, right? So finally I said, after letting go of the previous project where you and I met, I finally said, like, let's write this up. Let's get this book done. And it came from the research, but it also came from my own journey of learning about other people's lives and learning about what the cost of racism, the lingering effects of enslavement on everybody, and what their opinions are and what their political situation is. I know that you're going to get to it later, but anyway, I'm going to talk about it right this second. I realized just the other day that one of the parallels between now and before, during enslavement, is that there are a separate set of facts. There is the story that the enslaved people were happy, that they needed to be, parented, that they were not mature, whatever the story was. And that was the set of facts that everyone was taught in areas where there was enslavement. And then there's the other set of facts, which is more informed by free people of color and people who had escaped from slavery, in addition to the abolitionists. And these are just incompatible, because one's true and one is false, and false so that people can be enslaved. And so I feel very much like that is one of the reasons to write it, to talk about the fact that New York State had slavery, that there was slavery in the North. And as using a character like Maggie, she has only been free for 8 years. It's still fresh. There's still people not just alive, but a couple generations alive. So that's part of the impetus of.
Yes, the laws are stunning to me. The laws of how, what year people were emancipated in the North, and yet continued to be enslaved basically years after their emancipation. I mean, these are things that it's historical facts, and historical fiction has always been a double-edged sword for me as a reader. Like, I don't like reading about an alternate reality of Queen Elizabeth's life, that she had a child with some guy, and all this was hidden. That drives me crazy. But what I love is when it's absolutely fact-based, which is what you did. You added in, you made up some characters and added them into a situation, but everything that happens, every book, every detail in the book really truly happened. And that's absolutely remarkable for me when I read it. And I didn't even know on the first draft, how much of it was based on your incredible research and how much of it you'd made up. And it come to learn that, no, this is all true. you know, truly extraordinary. Here's a question from somebody in the audience. How did you learn about the vernacular and period language and customs that you depict so believably in your book? Good question.
Yeah, thank you. Well, for one thing is I knew that there was all sorts of different people, different races, different levels of education within those characters, and some reading, some not reading, some from the South, some from the North. So I did quite a lot of research trying to read some books that came out in the 1830s, seeing what that was like, but also looking at scholars like there's a book called Talking Black, which is by an African-American linguist, and he's breaking down a lot of the speech patterns that people used, and that was extremely helpful. And so was Zora Neale Hurston's books and her studies. So her books were written in a certain vernacular that I wasn't going to be able to use, and that's where we are now. But there was a lot of the timbre and the language was there, and so taking that, and plus some contemporary African-American novels, contemporary to now, or modern novels, where they are also using people who are from the era of enslavement and how they handled this question. So the guy who wrote who wrote Talking Black says at the end that basically you're trying to also write this for a modern audience. And so it has to be open and available to them. So at one point I went through the manuscript and I put tags, different colors on every single piece of dialogue for each character. So I could read just the dialogue that character did to make sure that it was the same. And that whatever decision I had made, I was sticking with for that character throughout the whole thing to try to get some uniformity. And so that was, it was easy, just like that.
Right, so easy, my goodness. Yes, that's real precision. There's a question here about, it's about the trail downtown, and I don't know if you can answer this. Who's responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the trail that is downtown? And if you can't answer it, maybe we can answer it, find the answer later.
Well, it's put together by the fabulous Underground Railroad. Wait a minute, Mary, help me. The Utica County Freedom Trail Commission has done these wonderful signs, and they start at Post Street is number 1, Bleecker Street, where the Bleecker Street Presbyterian Church is, where the 1835 anti-abolition riot and the founding meeting of the New York Anti-Slavery Society start. And then you go around in a circle and they have all these explanations on these signs. Unfortunately, there's a whole bunch of burrs growing up in one of them. So, that really is me and Mary and Jan Demichis and others who should be out there with our gardening shears on, pulling those weeds up. There's one more sign that's supposed to go up, that's supposed to be down near Utica Coffee on Lower Genesee Street, where the Hayden building is, which is also in the novel. And that's going to go up. I think it's done, not printed yet, but it's getting there. It's getting there. So they're going to have all of these points. And I might as well just say, while I have everybody's attention, is that I'm developing a Mrs. Galway walking tour, where you'll be able to click on different locations and see pictures that represent what the building or the area might have looked like. Like you'll be able to click on something in Chancellor Square Park and pictures of the Halley's Comet will pop up and that kind of thing. So that will be on my website.
That's wonderful, just wonderful. Oh, so before you go out there with your shears, though, please do finish your book tour, and you can, and the weeds can wait just a little longer. Don't abandon us yet. Here's another good question. What would be an example of an aha moment in your research that provided a key or missing puzzle piece to the narrative? That's from Milt Sinnott.
Milt Sinnott is he is the guidepost and the guiding light of a lot of this research. And I've appreciated his book so much. I was looking through a book about slavery in New York State. And I don't want to say the exact fact, but I was reading about what people in the period when the Gradual Abolition Act went into effect was July 4th, 1799. Those who were born enslaved before that time would be free in 27 years. Those who were born after that time would, in 27 years, they might still owe the people who owned them some of their lives. That was changed in a later law. But there was this period between 1799 and 1827 where there was a lot of mischief and a lot of law breaking about what could and couldn't be done. There could have been there was an internal slave trade in New York State. So you could sell within New York State, but you weren't supposed to go further. So anyway, that was one of the aha moments. Aha, I understand what one of the basic sins of this that gets the book going and the causes of a lot of the action.
Really good answer, Deirdre. Here's another question. Somebody has said, I'm jealous of your husband and others who had the opportunity to read earlier, your husband, Charles, to read earlier versions of the book and got to see the evolution of your novel. Can you tell us what major changes were made to come to the final version?
Well, I mean, it was first entitled The Society. Make my arms as big as possible. The Society. So I was going to talk about everything, the whole society, which I sort of did. And that was good, but you know, it really needed to be more honed. And then I found out about the comet, and I was like, we were calling it the comet because comet is a change thing. So I mean, the version that got presented to Johnny Temple and to Akashic Books was certainly 7 to 10 drafts later of getting rid of, you know, like the classic thing, you get rid of things that don't help move the story forward. And if it's in there and it's not really purposeful, it's got to go, and make those hard decisions so that you have a book that is really moving forward propulsively. And that's kind of what I wanted. So it was really honing what the message was and finding the moral dilemma, the real moral dilemma at the center.
There is another question here. Will the links you described, this is your walking tour, I believe, be on the electronic version of the book? Most schools are using digital books now. And a key piece, this is a teacher, and a key piece of reading a longer novel is teaching it along with other texts. So this is something for us to think about.
Yeah.
I'm an electronic dumbbell, so we'll have to get somebody to help us.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And maybe, you know, there's others who will struggle with it.
Good, and maybe we'll get somebody else to come in and help us figure that out. So Deirdre, go ahead. You have questions from the audience?
I want to see if anybody here has a question. I see a hand raised, a strange man in the back. Jan Demetres.
Repeat the.
He wants to know where the images on the beautiful cover came from. And the cover was done by Renette Zimmerly. And I'm so in love with this cover. So in love with the cover. So we were back and forth on several different covers. And, you know, one of the things that I absolutely wanted was to have a figure or two figures, white and black, on the cover, like very important. And so we were looking in the Library of Congress's website, and they have all these images. And these two are unnamed people who are from period photographs of that time. And they're just both so lovely. And it is very striking, and I couldn't be more thrilled with it. Any
And
other questions? Oh, sorry. Okay, one more question here. Well, I've just been working with historian Judith Wellman, Jan Demichis, Mary Hayes Gordon, Jessica Handy, and others, doing a whole survey of the Underground Railroad sites in Oneida County. And you're the third or fourth person that I've met, I know you, but I met today who was asking about that house because it has this reputation. However, nothing has been found. There's been no connection to any abolitionist ever living there in the deeds. There's been no reference to this house as having a subscription to an abolitionist newspaper. And there has been no, like a lot of the places that we found were referred to later even in newspapers where they were talking about specific stories of specific people coming by. So the answer there is, I'm sorry, and the question was about the house on Oxford Road, the yellow house that everybody knows was on the Underground Railroad, and the answer is we have not been able to prove that. And Judith Wellman sort of looked at it and said, that's the kind of house everybody wants to be part of the Underground Railroad, but we just did not find it, and we did look, and other people have looked very carefully trying to find that if that house was connected. And certainly word of mouth and histories, oral histories are important, but they have to be, other evidence has to pile up. And some of that evidence is what I described.
Deirdre,
Yes.
there's another question from the audience, from the virtual audience. It sounds like you began researching and writing the third Mrs. Galway during the Obama presidency, maybe even before Black Lives Matter rose to prominence. How much has all that has happened since then surprised you, and how has it affected your telling of the story? Good question.
That's a great question. I remember having a conversation with somebody who I absolutely adore, who's out in Hollywood, who tried to tell me that we were in a post-racial period after Obama was elected, and that it didn't really matter anymore. And this is a sincere and smart person. And I was like, no, I know that that is wrong. I know that racism still exists, that there is, both internal, external, and institutional racism, and that it still has to be fought on a regular basis. So I started writing in 2015, and Obama was elected in 2016, am I correct? So I was writing all the way through that. I turned it over to the publisher in 2019, before George Floyd, but not before Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter started around Michael Brown's killing in St. Louis. I am very affected by the movement of people against this oppression. I don't know exactly how I could point out to a place in the book where something is definitely triggered by that, but I've been an activist for a lot of years, doing a lot of things. Oh, Trump was 2016, says Maggie. Obama 2008. Okay, sorry. Oops. Don't question me on the presidents. I don't really know. So anyway, so I decided. So go ahead. I decided to continue to write again about this.
It's such an important point. I mean, that you responded that way to this sort of, again, another type of whitewashing. We're good now. It's all fine. But you as an activist who's all your, I mean, you came and helped me when I had to go to court and stood behind me and said, oh, to my lawyer, oh, I've been arrested lots of times. I know how this works. And it was so wonderful. It was done with such pride, and I was so proud to be your friend and to have you there with me. And I think about that a lot, like, why did I sort of just accept that might, I knew it wasn't true, but I thought, well, we're better now, at least better, not perfect, but somewhat better. And to see what happened just in 4 years, 3 years, 5 years since 2015 or so, when it started to feel to me like we were heading in a very, very bad and dangerous direction, to truly wake up. But you've been awake the whole time. You were working on this book before. You've been marching for years. You've been protesting for years. And I think that's really important. That was your friend James O'Barr, by the way, who asked that very good question. Are there any more questions from the audience? We don't have any more. Oh, there's one more here. Have you scheduled any book signings for those of us who treasure old-fashioned print books?
Well, I am going to be in Little Falls at the library next week. If you go to my website, either deirdresinnott.com, and don't spell it the way it is on this thing. Look at the book, or you can go to thirdmrsgalway.com, and you'll find this area on the website that has events coming up. So the answer is yeah, and I'm also going to go to the Oneida County Farmers Market with the Oneida County History Center to the Utica Farmers Market, which is down by the train on Saturdays. Yeah, tomorrow I'm not going to, say that. Oh, the books. The books are available at the Oneida County History Center. And before I leave, I'm going to sign all the ones they have. It won't be individually inscribed, but I also will be joining them maybe next Saturday, not this Saturday, at the farmers market.
We have a wonderful writer with us today, Robin Oliveira, who's written several best-selling historical novels, Winter Sisters being the last one. And she asked an interesting question. May I ask, why a novel and not a straightforward history?
Well, I am in the process of writing a straightforward history about the two men who came from Shenandoah Valley, Virginia, all the way through Pennsylvania, all the way up to New York, and landed in Utica in September 1836, and doing all of the stuff that surrounds them, talking about the route that they took. They were captured by a slave catcher from that town and brought before Judge Chester Hayden. And so I'm in the process of writing that book and maybe about 10 others about real life people in Utica. But, my mentor is a really creative person who helps me work on fiction. And it was a relief, honest to God, it was a total relief to get away from, first of all, my memoir was just talking about me, but also be able to get into writing fiction and have just a little bit more control over what the truth of the narrative is.
Well, I think genius to put in the enslaved pregnant lady who's escaping, who's come here for a reason. And I thought that was really brilliant. I know David Black gave you some advice on that too, on how to create sort of the inciting incident to move the novel forward. And I'm just thrilled that you wrote it as a novel. I think it was freeing in many ways for you, and also for me to read it as an editor and as a novelist myself. I think, I was able to see the structure of a novel in a way that I probably would not have been able to do with a straight up history. But I'm glad you're writing a history about that, about those two men. That's very interesting.
So as of tomorrow being Friday, I will be here from noon to say 5 or 4:30, and signing books. And people came in today to buy books. They bought a bunch of them. We have a bunch more. Don't worry, we're not going to run out. But so you can meet me tomorrow here if you couldn't be here in person. And also just check my website for other live events.
Robin also says, I love fiction for the way it enlivens the truth of history. And I think that's a wonderful statement from a novelist, a historical novelist. I think it does bring such richness to this book. We become so involved with these characters and their plight and how they come to change, many of them. I think I'm really glad that you did write it as a novel.
I want to thank the Oneida County History Center for hosting this and being the best hosts ever. We're at 1608 Genesee Street, Utica, New York, right now and tomorrow. So please come by. And they, right this minute, for some weird reason I can't quite figure out, are the only people in town who have it. So come and pick it up.
Wonderful.
Okay, I think we're done. I want to thank you. Thank you all.